Okay, we are now live. Welcome to the show, everyone. Today is a very special episode. It is episode 500 of In the Tank. And so we decided to do a pop culture or cultural in general centered episode so that we can take it easy and prepare for Independence Day tomorrow. So, is a cultural shift occurring? Is the stranglehold that the global left have there I go, messing it up. Okay, that the global left has had over our media and entertainment, and even the way we see our own country finally lessening. Is go woke, go broke a lasting trend? And will I ever recover from watching just 2 episodes of Disney's Ironheart? Time will tell. We are going to talk about all of this and more in episode 500 of the In the Tank podcast. All right, welcome to the In the Tank podcast. I am Linnea, Lueken, your host, and we also, as usual, have Jim Lakely, Vice President of the Heartland Institute. Jim, how are you?
I'm doing great. A happy Independence Day weekend to everybody. I encourage all of us to call it Independence Day and not July 4th. July 4th is just a date on the calendar. Independence Day is one of the greatest days in the history of humanity. So I hope everyone has a great weekend. It's going to be beautiful. And I have a steak coming my way. I'm very much looking forward to it.
Awesome. We also have Chris Talgo, Editorial Director at the Heartland Institute and Socialism Research Fellow. Oh, no, we don't. I thought we did have Chris. Never mind. We do not have Chris Talgo. We also have Sam Karnick, Senior Fellow at the Heartland Institute. Sam, what are you doing for 4th of July or Independence Day? Sorry, Jim.
I think I'm going to read some articles about America, seriously, and get into what a great and fascinating and brilliant and crazy nation this is, and how good we can be when we really want to.
All right, excellent. We also have special guest Donald Kendal, the Donald himself, director of the Glenn C. Haskins Emerging Issues Center at the Heartland Institute. Wow, it's a good thing I can't talk today. How are you doing, Donnie?
I'm doing wonderful for Independence Day. I think I'm going to try to sneak into the socialism conference that's taking place in Chicago. I feel like they do this every year, an Independence Day weekend or whatever. That's when they hold their conference. I don't know if it's out of irony or whatever, but I'm going to just, demand that I be allowed in, even though I didn't buy any tickets or anything. I think they should allow me to be in. That would be consistent with their ideology, wouldn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely. They certainly, hate hierarchy and they hate people paying them. For sure. All right. So before we get started, as always, you guys, if you want to support this show, you can go to heartland.org/inthetank and donate there. Please also click the thumbs up to like the video. And remember that sharing it helps break through YouTube's suppression. Even just leaving a comment helps with the algorithm as well. If you are an audio listener, you can help us out by leaving a nice review on whatever platform you're using. So this should be a really fun show, you guys. So let's get right into it. So topic number 1 is just in general, are we seeing a culture shift? I want to see if you guys think that it's actually happening. It's tough to pin down. It seems like every time there's major pushback against the kind of leftist orthodoxy that dominates most of our legacy cultural establishments, like film, music, industries like that, there's always some kind of a doubling down from those establishments. We often say, if you go woke, you go broke. But as Donnie and Justin and others here on this panel have pointed out, it's not really about traditional economics right now, right? Stakeholder capitalism is kind of what dominates these industries. And companies are going to plow forward through public backlash a lot of the time because they know that they have backers, for now at least. It's going away a bit, so hopefully this will end. But with ESG and DEI related funding. So Donnie, I want to go to you with this first. just your general impression off of that. And then I have an example of this that we're going to take a look at that's very disturbing and I hate it. So it'll be fun.
Yeah, so I think that we are surely going through a cultural shift. I actually had a debate amongst colleagues back in November when we were at an event about this concept of like the pendulum swinging back and forth. And I think over the last, I don't know, 15 years, it swung so far to the left. That's where all of this kind of cultural wokeism and all of that cultural Marxism, all that stuff that's the catchphrases for all these, the buzzwords for all of this, really got their foothold. They metastasized over a long period of time. And I think, and maybe you can mark this if the history books want to mark this in a specific time frame. Maybe it started with the Donald Trump, rise to power and all of that. That we started seeing this shift the other way. And I've got a whole bunch of different examples and stuff I want to get into, but I think they apply better to some of these other categories that we're getting into. But I mean, if you just kind of look at some of the news today, and if you watch this podcast, I feel like we've covered this sort of stuff for a little while now. We can go from a bunch of examples of Jeff Bezos saying that he wants to have more conservative writing in the Washington Post, or Elon Musk kind of pulling back on the reins when it comes to like the stifling of conservative speech on Facebook. Elon Musk buying Twitter. Right now, we've got like the biggest thriving industry out there, the burgeoning industry out there of like the artificial intelligence, some of these emerging technology things. They're like tripping over themselves to kiss up to Donald Trump. Like that's the world that we're in right now. Like, and I know that a lot of that's just kind of just trying to make the best out of the current situation. And if there was a progressive that became president next, they would start kissing up to that person. But that's the reality that we're in right now. There was literally a Twitter argument between Sam Altman, who's the head of ChatGPT, and Elon Musk, everyone knows Elon Musk, about who likes Donald Trump more. Like that literally happened on Twitter like a month ago. So yes, there is definitely a cultural shift going on. You could look at it generationally, and we can look at it as it applies to Hollywood, the media in general, and politics at large. And we'll get into some of those examples soon, I'm sure. But I'll be curious if anyone disagrees or maybe thinks that this is just an aberration, a short-term aberration, and that'll fall away quickly or anything like that.
Anybody want to comment on that end, or?
Hey, I think the cultural shift is real. No question about it in my mind. I think what's interesting is that it's hard for people on the right in particular, and probably also for people on the left, to accept that there is a cultural change going on, because it didn't happen in 2017 through 2020. And that was an interesting thing, because at that time, Hollywood, for example, could still depend on the easy money and international audiences to basically slap up whatever junk they threw out there. And the same is true in music and books and so forth. And also, I think, though, that ultimately it was because the sense we were given from the government itself, and especially from the media, was that Trump's election in 2016 was illegitimate. It wasn't real, and therefore there was some ability to resist the temptation, to the normal temptation, in fact, to change culturally. Now it's very clear that there is a cultural change because this is real. The government is what it is. It has changed and become famously MAGA. And so the cultural change is, in fact, real. Companies like Disney and the big music companies recognize that the audience has changed. This happened at least twice that Trump was elected, and the world has changed, and they're going to have to acknowledge that and deal with it.
Yeah, and I wanted to bring up too, unless Jim had something to add here, but an example that we have of a get woke, go broke moment that is materializing in the automotive industry.
Yeah, I mean, like, before we play that clip, that I know, because I just want to delay the pain to your brain as long as possible. So let me
Yeah, thank
riff a
you.
little bit here. Yeah, obviously there has been a cultural shift, and we're going to be talking about that cultural shift in our politics, in our and in Hollywood, and in our pop culture, and in our broader culture. I've said this. This is my theory, and I'm sticking to it. And I think it's been proven right more and more each day. Is that Trump broke the brains of our cultural betters, and the people that create pop culture for us. And after 2016 election, the Hollywood was absolutely apoplectic. And we know this because they would film TikTok videos of themselves crying into the camera over Hillary not being president. And they really did convince themselves that if they just weren't so subtle about all of the liberal and leftist messaging that they've constant environmentalism and stuff that they've been constantly cramming into the movies and TV shows and media coverage for that matter, if they just weren't so subtle about all of that, that Hillary would have been president. And so they were never going to let that happen again. And so really immediately after that election, everything changed. And then the 2020 election, they started shoving it even more. Then of course in 2020 with the Summer of Love, they really Hollywood especially really cranked it up and started imposing more of the message, as the critical drinker calls it, into literally every single piece of media
Yep.
that they produce. And it's been just grinding on us culturally for 4 years. And ultimately, the customer is the one that determines whether or not pop culture is going to take off and be accepted, not the creators. The cliche, art is in the eye of the beholder. And in fact, an artist doesn't make art for him or herself. He makes art for others. And it's the art only has value if somebody else sees some value in it. And the American people have looked at what as Hollywood has produced over the last 4 or 5 years with all the DEI mandates and with all of the messaging, the leftist political messaging, and they've just said, I've had enough. And it's not just that they're sick of the messaging. They've put so much of the messaging ahead of story that it's objectively terrible stuff, movies and TV shows. But the part of on the thumbnail for this podcast today is the went woke went broke. I think is what went woke went broke is what Donnie, our great graphic designer, put on that. And we have a great example of that with Jaguar, who didn't get the memo that there was a big cultural shift, not just in America but in the world. And that, being this woke and checking off as many boxes as possible in a 30-second ad leads to the ruination of your company.
Yeah, so this is also I wanted to just say, Donnie, did this mean went woke broke?
Yeah, it's was it all here alive in?
Yeah, the old Walking Dead one. That was good callback. All right, so yeah, like Jim alluded to here, one example of the bizarreness coming from the corporate world, which I think they probably had in the pipeline for a long time. It was kind of too late to withdraw from this angle by the time it came out. So the aesthetic choices that Jaguar has decided to make, they're pretty interesting. They are attempting to kind of transition their company into a boutique kind of niche sort of brand. But I'm not really sure outside of the like RuPaul Drag Race scene who exactly this marketing and design appeals to. Andy, if you could pull up the shockingly appalling video.
That poor guy.
I forgot how terrible this was.
That poor guy. Yeah.
I liked that a lot better in the 80s when it was a New Order video.
They didn't even show the car. They didn't even show the car in there.
It's like that Stone Toss comic. Like, how is this going to help us sell cars? Cars?
Cars? We're not selling cars. We're selling a lifestyle. And
Yeah,
actually, that's what they
literally-
used to do. Actually, they would sell the rich, upper class British lifestyle, and now that's the lifestyle they're trying to sell. And not a lot of people live that lifestyle, and they certainly don't have enough money to buy Jags.
What would you do differently if you were making a parody of this?
Nothing. Absolutely nothing.
Honestly,
put a
like that's
funnier
like
hat on
straight
one or
out of
two.
like SNL. That's like an SNL clip from like
It's
the
like
90s or
Sprockets.
something.
Right.
Yeah,
It's
Sprockets.
Sprockets.
That's
I don't
Exactly.
see how you could exaggerate it any further. And it
No.
is interesting because they are selling a lifestyle, and that's exactly what they're doing. They're not selling cars. Nobody's buying Jaguars anymore.
Yeah, so-
it's really unbelievable.
And
Also,
the
I loved your unintentional pun of them transitioning to be whatever this new thing is. And then you also mentioned RuPaul Drag Race, which is they need a car if they're going to do a drag race, right? So this is perfect. I think they were trying to
Look.
align themselves.
It's just over your head, Donnie. You don't
I
get it, man.
carefully wrote my notes today for this
Gotcha.
episode. All right, so and then the worst part of it all is when they actually revealed the concept vehicle that this stuff is advertising. It astonished everybody by being very ugly. It has, all of the appeal of a air conditioning window unit from behind. The ugliest modified pink flamingo Cadillac you have ever seen from the flank, and flat nothingness in the front. So the only thing that's like mildly interesting about the car is the interior, but only if you really like those plastic white egg chairs from IKEA. So that is what their copy nothing marketing resulted in. And so from Breitbart, we have what the go broke part comes in. Breitbart says, according to figures from the European Automobile Manufacturers Association, the company registered just 49 new vehicles in April 2025 compared to 1,961 units sold in the same month last year. So year-to-date sales from January to April slumped, dropping 75%. And globally, Jaguar sold just 26,000 vehicles for the 2024-2025 financial year, an 85% drop compared to 2018. Now, it's important to note that Jaguar is, this isn't all just because of this advertisement. Jaguar is actually not actively not trying to sell lots of cars. They have not put out very many cars. So they are trying very hard to become a boutique fashion brand. It's stupid, but it is what they want. It's what their current CEO wants. So, but shouldn't they be designing something appealing? Or like something beautiful? They used to make like the most spectacularly beautiful cars inside and out, just iconic. And so my question is, what happened? Why is this like, white British dude CEO pushing this stuff? Will it ever stop? I'm not British. We have British people in the audience, and it does kind of feel like vandalism of like design heritage from their country. I'm sure our, the guys over on Top Gear are probably like crying into their tea over this one. It's terrible. So I don't know. What do you guys think of this one?
Chris Nisbet with a wonderful Wacky Racers reference. That is a beautiful comment right there. Yeah, maybe Jim mentioned this already, and maybe we'll talk about this when we get into the Hollywood thing. But this is all like, I think, just a misreading of where it's going. And they made these decisions, years ago, right? They went down this trail, this path years ago. Because it takes all of this time to develop all of these different plans and this marketing campaign, actually film the stuff, design the car is probably secondary, whatever. But they just like, oh, this is clearly where culture is going. Let's get on this. We'll be ahead of schedule. We'll be there before everyone else gets there. And they didn't realize that the pendulum swung the other way. So when they're out on that limb, going off in that direction, they realize that they're completely alone with no one to sell cars to. So I think that this is just horrible mistiming of the market, of the culture, all of that sort of stuff, and it's just a bleak outcome for it. That's my guess on this specific thing.
I think Jaguar has a long history of pursuing status and producing the cars as a status symbol. And the status symbol was that something elegant and beautiful and high performance was something that you would want to associate yourself with. And so people would say, they drive a Jaguar and they look really cool. And that was a good thing. But what has happened is that wealth and coolness of that sort are not as respected in the media today. And so Jaguar went after what people really respect, which is weirdness and high personality, no matter how strange. And an important element of that, I think, is that there are so many Hollywood stars who have children that are non-binary and who you presume probably are going to grow up to look like the people in the Jaguar ad that you just saw. So I think they're chasing a certain kind of status that, as Donnie indicated, is ending anyway. And they were the company that peaked too late in this regard. They went after something that has already run off into the bushes somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, this is like, talk about a cultural shift. Sam, you and I are old enough to remember this. This is like coming out with a disco album after the Death to Disco fiasco during between two games of a doubleheader at Chicago's Comiskey Park in what was that? Probably 1981 or something. I'd have to look it up.
Around there, the Disco Demolition.
The Disco Demolition, yeah. So it's like coming out with a disco record when disco is out, it's dead. Your Rick D's coming out with your Disco Duck song after disco is dead. It just also reminds me of that quote from Spinal Tap when the band is asked why they're not filling stadiums anymore, and they said our audience is more selective. And for Jaguar, their audience, their customer base is now so selective, so exclusive that only 49 units were sold in a month in Europe, which is indicative of what the costs are when you are this culturally out of step. And that's the thing that I think one of the themes that we're going to talk about. We'll move on to the next topic, but it's what has got people up to here with all of this woke stuff was the absolute inability to escape political messaging, no matter where you went. You hear it in church. You see it on TV shows. You see it in the movies. If you consume any mainstream media, it's nothing but agenda and propaganda hammered at you at your forehead nonstop. It was inescapable. And eventually people found escapes. They found new media, like things like this program and thousands, millions maybe of other programs that are on YouTube and other channels. So that's where the cultural shift has come. Not just Americans, but people around the world have said, we're done with this. We're not doing it anymore. And it's going to be a lag until Hollywood, Madison Avenue, media, if it ever catches up, and even our politicians to catch up with where the American people and normal people are, where they are not consumed and obsessed with these things all the time and just want to live their lives and not be bothered with it.
Yep, and that transitions us pretty nicely into our Hollywood segment today, because just like Jaguar, as the Brits would say, was kind of missing the boat because of how long it takes to develop these products. The same goes, I believe, for video games and movies and television shows. They are a little bit behind. So we probably have, at least another couple of years of woke stuff in film before it finally goes away. But so, all right, this is the part that we have been looking forward to. Conservatives will say this stuff doesn't matter sometimes. They'll say, who cares if Pixar is releasing nothing but ugly flops? Who cares if Marvel content and comics are dead? Who cares if Amazon vandalizes every IP they get their hands on? But I think that members of this panel do think it matters. I think that the entertainment culture, or the entertainment that a culture produces, reflects and sometimes influences their values. And so lately, it's not been looking so good for America, if you've been paying attention. And Jim, you brought the latest Pixar work to our attention. I had no idea that Pixar was still making movies, so this was new to me. I think the last one I heard of was Coco, and I didn't see it. So anyway,
That's considered the last good Pixar film that's been made, actually. This Coco. So
Really?
you missed it.
Okay,
Oh,
so I
well.
read the article that you sent from Hollywood Reporter, which said that this particular new film that's come out had a test screening where not a single person said that they would be willing to see it in theaters. And then the studio hacked it to pieces to try to salvage that, and it actually made it worse. It made it into a nothing. So if you wanted to talk about that a little bit.
Well, yeah, sure. So Ilio was made. It's been sitting in the can, production started, I think, in 2022 or late 2021, and the movie seemed to have been almost finished with their original director, who was an openly gay Hispanic director, and he was determined to tell his story in the story of Ilio. And he had there was a character that was the mother of the child, the little boy, 11-year-old boy, Ilio. The mother was played by America Ferrera. They screened it. They did a test screening in about as close to regular America you can get by moving east from Hollywood, and that's in Arizona. And as you mentioned, the story from the Hollywood Reporter mentions that they showed the first cut, and they asked just basically a focus group, how many of you would see this in a theater? Please raise your hand. Not a single hand went up. And the intent of the director and the creators of the show was to, they weren't going to openly make an 11-year-old boy gay, but they were going to have him queer coded, meaning that there was a scene where he collects trash and makes clothes out of it and calls it a trashin' show and puts it on for a hermit crab on the beach, who I guess would be an appreciative audience. That got cut out of the movie. He had a poster on his wall in his bedroom that implied heavily that he had a crush on a boy instead of say a girl. And so he was homosexually coded as an 11-year-old. Now, look, there is absolutely nothing wrong with telling stories about the wide spectrum of human experience. That's fine. In fact, most conservatives don't have any problems with that. What they are, again, this goes up, and people have kind of had it up to here because it's constant. It's in everything. And to queer code an 11-year-old boy who doesn't even really know what at 11 years old, there's no reason for you to understand any of those things. You haven't reached puberty yet. Why are we doing this and then having this, directed toward children and families? And it's because there is an agenda, there is a message you're trying to push, and you want to do that as early as possible, apparently. Well, again, nobody in Arizona raised their hands, would pay to see this in a theater. So the director was very hurt by this and left the production. They had to bring in two other directors. America Ferrera was so mad that she left in a huff. So they had to recast the entire character. So instead of him having his mother in the movie with him, he had his aunt in the movie with him, and they recast that one. And so the film had to be entirely redone. And now this story in the Hollywood Reporter points out that the people that they talked to that were upset that they changed it from being, a queer themed story into a more straightforward story about a child being abducted by aliens. I mean, yes, it's a fantasy story, but they are convinced that if they just kept it the way it was, it would have been a hit. And instead of spending $150 million on this film, they probably spent $250 million on this film. And Linnea, the reason you had no idea this movie was coming out is that they decided not to spend basically any marketing money to let anybody else know that this movie was coming out. And it ended up being the worst performing Pixar movie of all time. I've been doing a lot of reading about this, aside from the story changes and the stuff I just brought up. But, the animation style for Pixar is pretty garbage. I don't know if Andy can bring up a picture of what the characters in Ilio look like, the human characters. Those are the same. It's the same, weird look. It's basically a digitally animated Wallace and Gromit, which looks fine. It makes sense in a claymation animation production, but it looks terrible in a digitally animated production. And these are the way they made humans in Ilio. This is the way they made humans in, I think, Seeing Red. Was that the movie that they had? Yeah, they call that like bean face, like bean mouth. It's just off-putting, and then the character design itself is really bad. So what we have here is a combination. I've gone on too long already. I apologize, but what we have here is actually what's going on in Hollywood is a combination of putting messaging and a political agenda ahead of storytelling, plus getting rid of all the veteran animators at places like, there's been, you go to filmthreat.com, there's been extensive reporting on this, is that in the interest of DEI, they fired all of the veteran animators and storytellers that they had because they were mostly white men. And they replaced them with younger, more diverse people who don't know what they're doing. And that's why you go from something, I still want to think one of the best movies I've seen in the last 20 years, which is The Incredibles, which actually animated human beings in that story in a way that was, aesthetically pleasing, especially much more pleasing than what we have right now. And they could write a story, and a heroic story, a story that celebrates the power of families. And now, so you fire all the people that know how to do that, and then you end up with garbage like Pixar is now putting out. They used to be able to crank out $1 billion every time they hiccuped. Now they can barely get 25% of their initial investment in their own films. Hollywood did this to itself, and it's going to crash and burn and probably be replaced by something else.
Yeah. So I want to jump in. Just going back to you started this off talking about the idea of, some people like dismissive of it, like, this isn't important. This is just, silly movies and TV, all of that stuff. And you said people on this panel would disagree with that. I am staunchly one of those. I think that the movies and TV industry, that whole institution, is an incredibly valuable one to culture, to society, to the United States, whatever you want to say it. And the state that it has been pushed into in just the last 20 years is abysmal and is having major repercussions, because a lot of people learn values from TV and media and all of that. And I know that some people listening to this will grimace at that because they think that they should learn their values from their parents, from the church, all of that sort of stuff. And of course, that is the case. But if we're being real, it's a pie chart, and maybe a sliver for church and your parents encompasses some percentage of that pie chart. But movies and TV and stuff that kids, adults even, are watching definitely shift that. They teach morals, they provide principles, that sort of stuff. And back, years and years and years ago, decades ago, Jim's time, all of these studios and channels and all of that, because there were so few of them, they had a real ability to target the entire population. So they would create this stuff that would resonate with everybody. It was very basic principles and morality stories, the hero's journey, all of this sort of stuff that basically everybody can relate to, at least in some point of their life. Now it's been fractured so much that we were going off in all of these different directions. And as Jim was saying, the whole system has been totally perverted, literally and figuratively, by all of these things going on. And so now people that are watching this, they see these things and they wonder, and they see these stories and they wonder if they should even let their children watch this stuff. When you put on a movie, like a classic Disney movie for your kids while you're off doing the dishes or something like that, you could, rest assured that what Buzz Lightyear and Woody are doing is fine for your kids. You can't have that reassurance anymore. When you put on one of these shows, you're like, oh, maybe something terrible is going to happen. I'm going to have to explain or whatever. So what that does is degrade the entire institution. And I know that some people are like, great, get rid of the institutions. But that to me is not a good solution. I would rather reclaim the institutions and try to get them back full functioning to a point where they are, passing on these messages that everybody can agree with, that resonates with everyone, all of these sorts of things. We are so far from that. And another example of it that I think we can get into a little bit is that new show Ironheart. But I won't get into that yet because I've got a whole rant prepared for it. But I think it just shows, and I'll get into it in a little bit, just how far off the mark the studio Hollywood system has become. It is insane.
Yep. You guys know that in preparation for this particular episode, Donnie sat down and watched Ironheart. I sat down and I got through 2 episodes of it. I actually got through almost 2 episodes because I stopped about 5 minutes before the end of the second one because I just couldn't take it anymore. It broke me. It Yeah, let's definitely talk about that right now actually, because that show is the perfect DEI show. It is flawless in every way. It ticks every single box. It has a mostly non-white cast. It has multiple ambiguously gendered individuals, including one like straight up drag queen type character. It makes passing comments on pretty much every liberal pet project. And that's in the first 2 episodes that I watched. Guys, I suffered watching this thing. I tapped out and I did not continue. Usually I give a show 3 episodes before I will call it just terrible, but I couldn't make it.
Well,
Um,
let's provide a little bit of context for everyone that doesn't even know what Ironheart is. So,
sure.
as everyone knows, the media Goliath over the past 15 years has been like the Marvel universe, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, starting with Robert Downey Jr.'s Iron Man and going through Thor and Captain America, all going into the Avengers. These movies just making billions of dollars. And then COVID happened. They went super streaming. And then a bunch of streaming shows have been put out. The Falcon and Winter Soldier, all of these little Marvel-esque things. The latest iteration is Ironheart, which is supposed to be, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, because I really don't know the lore of this. It's like almost like a spiritual successor to Iron Man, because
Yeah.
Robert Downey Jr. has hung up the helmet. So it's this really super smart a girl from Chicago that is like the next MIT genius that can build an Iron Man suit just as good as Tony Stark. And this movie was dropped on Disney Plus like a sack of bricks. And yeah, we watched it. We watched it for you, audience, so that you don't have to.
Yeah, exactly. We watched it so you don't have to. That is an old throwback. I don't know if that guy's still around on YouTube or not. Yeah, it is basically the attempt of well, where should I start with this? This character has not existed for very long. This character of Riri Williams, who is Ironheart, has existed since around like 2016 or 2015, I want to say. This is around the time that even though Marvel was doing really well in the box office, their comics were just crashing into the ground because for whatever reason, the like ESG or DEI funding came in and every single comic that was coming out was just like trash. No good legacy hero stories, all just terrible. So if you're a comics fan, it's a very bad time. Comics are more or less dead. I talked with a like a game shop owner whose store used to be able to make enough money to exist just selling comics, but they had to transition it into like a board games and D&D and like that kind of stuff, Pathfinder shop, just to stay open. So comics are dead. But this character was specifically designed because Marvel wanted a Black female Iron Man. And so they made a Black female Iron Man. And in this TV show, she's actually not quite as bad as the comic book version. The comic book version like steals all of the tech that she uses to build the Iron Man suit. I have a friend who is he's a great guy and he is married to a wonderful Black woman. And he told me his comment on this show after watching like an episode of it was, the KKK did not write this, but if they had, nothing would be different.
Oh my gosh.
It is so wildly offensive. All the characters are like criminals and it is it's very, very bad. Let's just say that.
So like we could. This isn't the show for this, so I won't get into this. But like, you could go in and just like shred everything down from like the dialogue to just like the decisions the characters are making and being nonsensical, all of that stuff. Like, there's one point, spoiler alert, no one's gonna watch this show, so I won't say spoiler too much. But like, her before like the big climax battle or whatever, her Iron Man suit gets like destroyed, so she has to build a new one, which she does in 2 days in a garage with some like hand tools. It's unbelievably stupid, but like that's not the point, right? The bigger point, to me at least, was that whoever wrote this, like they have been so infected by like that brain worm, meme or whatever, that like they don't even know how to tell like a traditional story anymore. And maybe there's like some part of the equation that I'm missing. I don't think that I am. I just think that they're so off the mark when they're like writing stuff now that they've just lost what it even means to have like a hero story. So generally speaking, with like a hero story, even if you have a flawed character at the beginning, there's usually general qualities that you can kind of see in those characters that allows you to be sympathetic to them. They're flawed, but maybe they're relatable. They have a home life that's kind of reminiscent of everyday people that you can kind of see yourself through their eyes, that sort of thing. Generally speaking, they're humble. They show, even if that's their character arc, that they become a great person, they'll still show glimmers of virtue. None of these qualities apply to our main character in this show. In fact, all of the qualities that apply to our character in the show are more consistent with a villain story, like the origin of a villain. They believe that they are right and that anyone standing in their way is wrong. They have a clear personal goal, not a goal that benefits everybody or whatever. It's specific to them. That's more of a villain thing. And they're ruthless and relentless in attaining their goal. All of these things apply to our character in the show more than any of the other first things that I mentioned about the hero. So I'm watching this, and I literally, before we went live here, I asked Linnea, who's a little bit more knowledgeable about like the lore and all of this stuff. I was like, is this character supposed to be a villain? Because to me, this show was like an origin of a villain. And I don't, and I wish that I could like give them the benefit of the doubt and say that they were just, subverting our expectations or something like that. But I truly think they're like, oh, this will make her badass. Let's have her do this, And it was just complete failure. And to me, highlights just the inability of these people to be able to tell a coherent hero story like the ones that built Hollywood generations ago.
Yeah, I'll say you skipped episode 2, you jerk. Because episode 2 is the one where that just like I crashed out about halfway through and then forced myself to watch it through the end of the main plot of the episode, and then I was like, no more, I can't do it anymore. But there is a point where, and we have a clip from this scene, there are 2 amazing parts in this one small scene where she goes to a like the son, I think he's the son of the main villain from the Iron Man movie, the first movie, and he's been like collecting all of these Stark Industry weapons and just like alien weapons and tech stuff, and he's just been like storing it in a bunker. And she found out about him because he sells some of it on the black market. She goes to go like blackmail him into giving it to her. So that's nice. She shows up to his place, and he is asking her about like why she wants to do the Iron Man thing. And she talks about how Iron Man's suit, he made it because he's like this billionaire. And if, she would be able to do the same thing if only she was a billionaire, but she's not. So she's, held back or whatever. And so Jim has a great meme that someone made based on this one click. Or this one clip. But this actually is not the comment that she makes that makes me crash out. It's shortly after this, but we'll play the clip anyway because it's funny.
Contributed immensely to the field, so I won't roast Tony Stark off rip. But I don't have $1 billion.
Tony Stark was able to build this in a cave with a box of scraps.
Yeah. So to our poor non-comic book movie watching audience, this is a mashup of a clip from the first movie the first Iron Man movie and this TV show. But so yeah, it's pretty good because yeah, Iron Man was literally like captured by Al Qaeda when he made his suit. So the idea that like he was only able to achieve this because he was a billionaire and had everything handed to him is obviously nonsense in the context of that universe. But the best part, the part that made me lose it, and I almost died watching this, was a couple of seconds later, the guy who she's talking to asks him, "So why don't you have an arc reactor? Where's your arc reactor?" And she goes, "Well, because they cost like $1 billion and I can't afford it." And he goes, "So how do you power the suit?" And she goes, "Well, my suit runs on wind and solar."
Get out.
It has jet
That
engines
is
in the hands.
Is that true?
Yes,
Yes.
it's true.
She goes deadpan, "My suit runs on wind and solar." And then a few scenes later, they show her charging the suit with 2 solar panels the size of a notebook.
That is unbelievable.
And
Someone
if,
should
Again,
make a
and if
meme of
our
her
audience
flying through the
understands
air
this, and so I
with
wrote
giant
on
wind
my
turbines.
phone, yes, little wings. And so I wrote on my phone a little little note where I said, all I said was, "Where the heck is your battery, girl? You are not running this suit on wind and solar." Oh my gosh, I
That's
died.
embarrassing. That is embarrassing.
I had to pause it and get up and walk out of the room for a minute, and then I came back to it and finished it. But it was unbelievable. I could not.
I think there's an interesting analogy here in the film itself, or the story itself, which is that she's going to recreate what somebody already did, which was a good thing, and she's going to use it for evil. And the people who made this series apparently didn't realize that that would be a parallel to what they've done, and that they are apparently using the Marvel storylines to do evil. It's fascinating.
Yeah, right. It was
That's
all
really
intentional.
astute analysis there. Yeah, it is. It's standing on the shoulders of giants, blah 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 stuff, you know. But it was really astonishing. Every line out of every character is like that. It's just like progressive picking out of a hat bumper sticker slogans. It's terrible.
Yeah.
I have a more general comment about Hollywood, but Jim, if you
Yeah, let
have
me-
anything about this show in particular.
Well, you know, from the chats we've shared together, I have quite a bit to say about it, but I will condense and summarize and get it back to the broader culture discussion I think that we want to have. But, you know, what does it say about our culture when the people creating our pop culture write Riri Williams, Ironheart, as an ungrateful, amoral thief, motivated by self-aggrandizement, and thought they were writing a hero that people should admire.
Right.
And they did that. She's the protagonist. She's the hero. She's the person that you're supposed to relate to and understand. And I know that the producer or the showrunner tried to equate Riri Williams with the great character Walter White from Breaking Bad, basically an anti-hero, which again goes to show that the new generation of DEI'd Hollywood does not have the talent of a Vince Gilligan, who wrote one of the best television shows and best dramas in the last 20 years. But we are supposed to admire her for the simple reason that she is part of the marginalized community as a Black woman. And that's it. And in fact, her whole crew are all in the marginalized communities. And so by default, you're supposed to consider them heroes because they are all being constantly oppressed by systemic racism and the patriarchy, and check down the whole list of the other things that are bad, right? And so that's it. And that's the kind of thinking that comes to you when you've been running the dominant culture in our country, and then now you think that everybody thinks like you do, or if they don't think like you do, they will be made to think like you do by flooding every bit of pop culture with the message until you get it through your thick head. But as you mentioned, Riri Williams, it's impossible for a normal person to like her. Even a little bit, it's impossible to like her. The first line of the series begins with her and her friend recording basically a TikTok video bragging about how, she's going to be bigger than Gates, bigger than Jobs, bigger than Pym, bigger than Tony Stark combined. She's a 19-year-old girl who is at MIT on somebody else's dime, by the way, is not grateful for a single thing that good has happened in her life. And she's the most selfish character I've ever seen depicted in a piece of fiction. Period. I mean, bottom line, she steals, she hurts people, she kills people, all for her own selfishness, and it's still not enough. So then at the end, spoiler alert, please don't watch this, but spoiler alert, in the end, she sells her soul to the devil because she's still not satisfied with all the things that she's already accomplished in her life. The 1-hour Netflix documentary, Poop Cruise, got more minutes viewed than Ironheart did after it released its first 3 episodes. So the good news, the upshot of all of this is that normal people, America is rejecting our cultural elites who have been abusing the position we give them as consumers to entertain us. They continue to abuse that, and they're being ignored, and something new and something good and something fresh may come in its place. But actually, we're probably just going to enjoy watching really wholesome and good stuff from Disney Marvel, like The Incredibles.
Yep, me sitting there still watching Columbo reruns.
Yeah, right.
I'm going to go back to that now that I've watched these 2 episodes of Ironheart, and I will not pick it up again. Anyway, so
there's been a couple of references in the chat talking about like, oh, you would think they would learn from Snow White or something, like another Rachel Zegler, and the answer is no. Hollywood does not seem to learn any lessons from any of their failures. In fact, the lessons that they learn are usually the opposite of what they should be learning, and it's always this blaming of the audience, and that it's like they throw out these accusations of racism or some other ism, sexism, whatever, and then they just double down and they just keep going. I wouldn't be surprised if Hollywood right now, or the Disney, is greenlighting a Snow White Part 2. I truly would not be that shocked if they did that, despite losing hundreds of millions of dollars on that. And I was actually looking at, this just the box office, right? Because you would think money talks when it comes to these industries. That, it really has fallen off. And I don't know how much of it you want to attribute to the COVID stuff or just the idea of streaming becoming like the big thing. But I was looking at just the box office this year so far. Now, granted, we're in kind of the summer swing of things, so things could change in the next couple of movies that release over the next month or so. But there is not one American-made movie that has made $1 billion. And I say American-made movie because there is one movie that made $1 billion so far this year. It's called like Xi Zhang 2. It's out of China, and it made $1.9 billion. Everything else has failed to make $1 billion so far. That's including Minecraft and Lilo and Stitch. They're knocking on the door of $1 billion, but they're petering out and probably won't cross that line. So far, nothing has made $1 billion. So I looked up $1 billion movies by year. And if you go back, this was very uncommon. Titanic was the first to do it in 1997. Okay. Nobody else replicated that until Pirates of the Caribbean in the 2000s. But then in the late teens, the 20-teens, it started to become fairly commonplace where you would have 4 movies or so make $1 billion. And these were like the Avengers, some Pixar ones, Jurassic World, Fallen Kingdom, so on. So for Aquaman made $1 billion.
Aquaman, oh geez.
I know. In 2019, this is the high watermark. In 2019, Avengers Endgame, The Lion King, Frozen 2, Spider-Man Far From Home, Captain Marvel, Joker, Toy Story 4, Aladdin, and Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker all made $1 billion. So then COVID happened and it cratered. After that, there has been a kind of a, every year there's been a few movies. Spider-Man No Way Home was in 2021. Avatar, The Way of Water, Top Gun Maverick, Jurassic Park in 2022. Super Mario Brothers and Barbie in 2023, Inside Out, Deadpool, and Moana 2 last year. So far, nothing has made $1 billion. And everyone's kind of expecting Superman to make $1 billion, or the new Fantastic Four, or Jurassic World 4, or whatever that is. But none of those are guaranteed. This could be, depending on how those movies that I just listed end up, this could be the first year, and I don't know how long, maybe 2007, that a movie has not broke $1 billion made by an American studio. If that isn't like setting off alarm bells in Hollywood, I don't know what ever will. So yeah, that I found that very, very interesting.
I'll bet it is setting off alarm bells. And it's a very interesting point because these big institutions and big companies like this, they don't change because the people within them change their views. You can't expect that the person who did the original version of Elio is suddenly going to make a new version of The Sound of Music that has the same principles as the original. No, the way these places change is that the people that were there are gone, and new people come in who are able to do or more inclined to do things that are in line with what the audience really wants. So I think that what you can expect to see is a real change in personnel in these organizations, the companies and institutions, and that will be characterized as Trump-style purges and evil behaviors. But what it really is a giving in to practical realities, which is that you can't have a big $1 billion investment in something, or let's say 500 million or whatever it is, that trivial amount of money. But you can't have that kind of investment in something and never get it back and do that over the course of a year several times. So there will be change, and it will be characterized as evil behavior, but it's simple common sense.
Yeah, I want someone else to jump in, but you are absolutely right, Sam. And there was an example of that already when Zaslav, I think his name is, took over Warner Brothers, HBO, or something like that. And the first thing that he did was like he just trashed a bunch of stuff, including one of those like Batwoman movies that was like already done. Essentially, he just like threw it in the dumpster, and everyone was just like pulling their hair out that he was just some like authoritarian crazy guy that took over and throwing away stuff. So you're absolutely right, and we've seen an example of that already.
Yeah, we'll see if it continues. I'm frankly just tired of sequels and things based on pre-existing content. Very tired of it. But anyway, Donnie, you shared a very interesting, and this is, broadening out again to establishment media. And I've seen some people in the comments bring this up too, late night television related or like comedy television related stuff. You shared an interesting clip from Instagram with us in the chat. Should we? It's kind of long. We probably shouldn't play the whole thing, but we can play like a minute of it. This is from a interview. If we have the clip, let me see.
Yeah. Before you play it, real quick.
Yeah.
Someone in the engineer guy says, when's Avatar 3 get released? You're absolutely right. Avatar 3 is like the most solid chance of a movie breaking $1 billion. I will be seeing it. Jim's rolling his eyes, but whatever. But yes, this clip, I'll set it up before you hit play on it. This clip is Tim Dillon, who is a comedian, podcaster. He's kind of right of center, I guess. He was interviewed by CNN for an hour, apparently. They released about some of this stuff that we're actually talking about that I also want to get into here. And they released like 8 minutes of it. 8 minutes of this hour-long interview. It was heavily edited, all of that sort of stuff. So he called out CNN. He said, why don't you release the whole hour? Like, I thought it was a good conversation. Release the whole hour. So they finally did, and people started picking through it and finding all of these great clips. This one that we're going to play, at least some of, is almost like pathetic. Like you can see he almost feels bad for this girl that he's interviewing with, the CNN like anchor lady, reporter lady. It's pathetic. So yeah, I play this and then I've got some comments about it.
Released the full 70-minute Tim Dillon interview that was recorded over a month ago but did not get released right away because they wanted to edit the footage. And after watching the entire thing, it's pretty clear why.
Jon Stewart, Stephen Colbert, left-wing critics of the Bush administration and of the Iraq War. Why do you think that style of comedy has fallen away?
Has it?
Yeah, I mean, according to the people who worked for them, yeah.
I think Jon Stewart's still very popular and goes viral all the time, saying interesting things,
you
right?
You think The Daily Show gets the same kind of audience?
I don't think The Daily Show does, but I think Jon Stewart, because you brought up Jon Stewart, so why? Well, that's a story of why traditional media has just declined. That comedy, there's very, very successful comedians that are left of center comedians.
Like who?
I mean, what do you mean like who?
Like
Chelsea Handler. I think John Mulaney, probably. I think that you would find Sarah Silverman. I think Bill Burr, Louis C.K. He's never voted for a Republican in his life. Why? Because he's an imperfect person? These are massively successful comedians. They're all more successful than I am. And there's nothing wrong with that. And they're all left-leaning comedians. Is there this idea that, like, they're not around or you can't find them? That's the craziest thing I've ever heard.
No. But there's not
They're all doing
this
great.
cultural energy.
Kimmel, Fallon.
But all those people who had the kind of like left-wing shows like Amy Schumer and Michelle Wolf, those have all been canceled. All those shows are canceled.
Well, but there'll be new ones. There'll be new ones. I mean,
Look at, he's
do
like trying
you
to
not
talk
have
her
the
off a
faith?
cliff.
Do you think there's going to be no
I just don't
left-wing
see-
comedy?
I don't see like a little ecosystem or like a galaxy. I mean, you might dispute this, but like in the sort of right of center
There's a galaxy
world,
There's an
right?
establishment.
There's Rogan and there's all this stuff pivoting around.
Again, is Trevor Noah not popular? He does arenas.
Yeah. Is he
does
popular?
He's an
He does
arena
arenas?
comedian. He's one of the most popular comedians in the country. Hassan Minaj, Ronnie Chang. These guys are all left wing and they're all really funny, really popular comics who I'm friends with in life.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I don't think this thing's happening. Whatever everyone thinks happening, I don't think is happening.
Why
This
do you
idea that like left-wing like where are they? Where are they? Where are they to be found? Where's Amy Schumer? I don't know. She's in her $15 million townhouse in Brooklyn. I think she'll be okay.
Yeah. So like I said, it was like pathetic. At one point, it seemed like he was almost trying to talk her off a cliff that she was going to jump off. Like it was so. But the thing is, like, I kind of agree with the CNN lady more so than Tim Dillon here. Now, granted, this is in the context of like that pendulum swinging concept, because in reality, you can't turn on TV without seeing a left-wing comic. I mean, every late night show is a left-wing comic. Every Comedy Central show is a left-wing comic, generally speaking. So the establishment is there, but it's like that ground that establishment is built on is collapsing. It is absolutely collapsing. She is seeing it. All of those shows, I forgot half of those people even had a show. The Samantha Bee and the Naomi Fox or whatever it was.
Michelle Wolf,
Yeah, like all of them had shows. They all got canceled, whatever, because that whole thing is dying. And what is thriving is this other thing that she had mentioned that he was kind of dismissive of, which is this other galaxy, this little universe that's being created that seemingly has like Joe Rogan towards the middle of it. And that is absolutely real. He seems dismissive of it, but it is absolutely real. That thing is growing. It is thriving. You can talk specifically about Joe Rogan, how he's probably the most influential media voice out there for probably the past 5 years. I mean, when Donald Trump went on a show, it was like the biggest event outside of like a Super Bowl in probably the last decade. But there was another thing that I wanted to bring up, which is that the show Kill Tony. Okay. Linnea, have you heard of Kill Tony? I don't see you if you're nodding. Okay. So Kill Tony is it's a YouTube show with Tony Heathcliff, I think I don't know how to pronounce his last name. He's like he's the main host of it. It's like a panel show. They have comedians on a panel. And then it's like basically they invite out amateur comedians to come out, do like their best 1 minute performance, stand up in front of an audience. And then the panel and Tony get to praise them, critique them, dog on them, whatever. It's really funny show. And they've been doing it for like 10 years, but it's only gotten popular in the past like 2 or 3 years to a point where they're like selling out Madison Square Garden. It's very right of center in terms of the kind of vulgarity of it all, the offensive quality to it. But not only that, but they'll have people on like comedians, that you've heard of, Jim Norton and Shane Gillis and all of that. But they'll also have on like cultural figures. Like there was an episode where Joe Rogan came out with Tucker Carlson, and Tucker Carlson was on this panel. They had Alex Jones on there before. They've had Jordan Peterson on there before, right? So it's this big kind of cultural thing that's going on, but it's creating its own ecosystem because 9 out of the 10 comics that goes on this is terrible and they make fun of them. And that's like the main entertainment factor of the show. But every like 1 out of 10 comes out there and is really good. and that person's invited back on and they get to become a reoccurring guest on the show. If they're really good, then Tony like basically puts them out on tour. And I don't know if he like acts as their manager or whatever, but he's got like several of these people that have made their debut on this show over the years that are out there doing real shows now, selling out venues and all of that sort of thing. So it's this real grassroots comedy thing that's formed, in that Joe Rogan orbit that is absolutely eating the lunch of any of these like establishment left comedians that have had these shows that have been funded by, Paramount or whatever to be put on Comedy Central. This is doing that on a shoestring budget, putting it out on YouTube, and it's getting millions of views every episode. So yeah, I think that this is another huge sign of this cultural shift. Comedy usually is the first step, leading indicator of the cultural shift. And I think that this example of it is a massive one, despite, Tim Dillon in there, trying to talk her off of a cliff, which I just thought was really funny. But so, yeah, I think that this is a huge sign of this cultural shift we've been talking about.
Donald makes a great point. And the fact that one of the examples that Dylan gave was that, I forget, was it Amy Schumer? He's saying she's home in her $15 million apartment. Well, she's not getting $15 million now. She got $15 million when Woke was a big draw. It isn't anymore. The world has changed. And as Donald pointed out, you can have a shoestring budget and do something that people really, really want to see and hear. So this is a big change. This isn't just some kind of a little thing. This is the world is changing and for the better.
Can we say something about the fried voice that CNN woman had? Yeah, people don't actually talk like that. Stop talking like that. Talk like Linnea Lueken, who has a fantastic voice and speaks like a real woman. Anyway, just gotta get that out there.
That wasn't vocal fry. What she was doing,
vocal fry, that's it, yeah.
What she was doing was, I don't know, overdosing on Xanax before going on television.
No. It's the thing is that it's cool to not care about anything. And that goes for like the way that the sound comes out of your throat and mouth. You can't caring about it and making it come out in like a coherent way. That means you care, and caring isn't cool. So let's kind of talk like this.
Yeah.
Yeah. She doesn't want to sound like she's too worried about the fact that all of mainstream media is collapsing.
Right. Oh, well, yeah, and that's the point I wanted to make. She actually does seem pretty worried, as Donnie said. He's trying to talk her off the ledge there, but for her to run down all of these shows, these not funny. Those shows were not canceled. Michelle Wolf did not have her show canceled on Comedy Central because she's a leftist. She had her show canceled because she's not funny. Samantha Bee's show was not funny. It's not funny to just do constant jokes about one side of the political aisle. I mean, that's one of the things that they've taken from us, our cultural betters, is the idea that comedy should be poking fun at everybody. It's an old saw, but Johnny Carson used to make sure that he poked fun at both Democrats and Republicans as equally as possible during his monologues, which back then in the 70s, I was born in 1970. And so I thought Johnny Carson was funny when I was, even 9-10 years old. It was much CTV back then, Johnny Carson's monologue. Jay Leno, the same thing. He thought it was important in order to have the broadest appeal possible to make fun of both sides. Saturday Night Live, for, the last 15 years, has decided that it cannot make fun of very many Democrats at all. In fact, their only jokes about Barack Obama was about how awesome he was. That's not a joke. And
That's
one of
a
their
joke.
infamous writers, his Jim something, his name escapes me, but he even excused this by saying that Barack Obama, he's like black obsidian. You can't get a hold of him to make fun of him. It's absurd. You make fun of his outsized ego that he hasn't earned with his achievements and accomplishments. That's amazing. You can do a ton of comedy off of that. So, but the point being that this she's on CNN. She's a CNN entertainment journalist, and she's sitting like that, and she's dressed like that. I mean, this is a podcast. I got a polo shirt on. I try to dress up. This is pretty nice. That's pretty pathetic if you're a member of the mainstream media and you're dressed like that and talking like that in a freaking interview. But the fact that she was lamenting, what about all these left-wing shows that have all been canceled? That means we're winning, guys. That the audience is winning, and that they cannot continue all of these things. One of the reasons Disney's shares are down into the toilet is because they keep cranking out movies that are so bad, so filled with messaging instead of story, that they are rejected by the audience, and they lose literally hundreds of millions of dollars on each one of these films. There's going to come a point. Actually, it was Margaret Thatcher says, eventually. The problem with socialism is that eventually you run out of other people's money. Disney's is finding out that eventually you release so many woke bombs, you run out of banks that will lend you money to make your next woke bomb. So the market corrects.
Yep, and Donnie, if you would post in the chat what the name of that comedian YouTube channel you were talking about was,
sure.
That would be good for our audience. Some of them missed what you said.
Yeah, it's called Kill Tony, everyone. I'll give them free promotion. Kill Tony. Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, just put Kill Tony into YouTube after watching this
You'll
stream, and you'll find it.
All right. So to kind of close out the show today, we're going to draw back even further and look at some kind of big picture items for culture in America. So first, as everybody knows, tomorrow is Independence Day. And we got this report from Newsweek looking at a Gallup poll that asked Americans how proud they feel of the country, or if they feel proud of the country. And Newsweek reports that only 58% of Americans reported feeling very or extremely proud of their country, according to a Gallup poll conducted June 2nd to June 19th. That is the lowest point since 2001. When the pollster began asking the question in its surveys. So that drop is largely fueled by Gen Z, only 41% of whom say that they are proud to be an American in an average of polls from 2021 to 2025. This compares to 58% of millennials, 71% of Gen X, 75% of baby boomers, and 83% of the silent generation. So, Sam, what does this mean exactly? Is this directly related to like American politics? I mean, at first blush, I thought it would probably be more of a reflection on Gen Z's frustration, even on the right, or especially on the right, maybe with representatives. Most Gen Z people, especially young men that I talk to on the right, are disappointed at best with Republicans. They pretty much all say that they just anticipate being betrayed so that they can't feel bad about it. So what are your thoughts there?
I think that the first thing I look at is education. The education system, when the baby boomers were being educated, it was still somewhat patriotic and still looked at America in a fairly realistic and fair and honest way. That has changed over the decades, and it's gotten worse and worse and worse. So by the time you reach the Zoomers, they're being taught in school that everything about America is bad. They're actually in school. They're hearing that certain races should be condemned, and that they themselves, if they happen to be part of that race or color or whatever you want to call it, should be ashamed of themselves for having all the benefits of being in that race. And so that kind of teaching, it does have an effect, obviously. One of the things about the media that we all have to recognize is that when you're a child and you say, well, your parents should be deciding what you think and believe in. Well, but the thing is, your parents have like an hour a day when they can talk with you. The rest of the time you're stuck in school and forced to listen to this kind of propaganda. And the rest of the time you're getting that same propaganda from the media. So what's going on there is that children have been increasingly educated to dislike America, to be not proud of it, but ashamed of it. And so they're reflecting those values. And that's why you see those numbers go down in terms of what each age group, how much they like America. Now, but that can change. And the way we change that is we put on our big boy pants, as you say, and get in those schools and make things right. And there are organizations out there who are working on civics education and on the kind of values that the public schools teach. And so that can change, but it's going to take time. And I think what we're seeing most of all is simply the results of people taking over institutions and changing what those institutions do. And those changes actually do have the effects that those people have desired. But you can change it back if you want.
Absolutely. Jim, what do you think? Or I see Donnie just turned his microphone on, so maybe he's got something to say on that front.
No, I'm actually waiting for someone to bring up that Mom Donnie fellow from New York.
Yeah,
I
that's our next. That's our next addition here. Is that like what kind of a culture is being inculcated in New York City that they would choose someone like him over even an Andrew Cuomo when it comes to their local representatives? But we'll get to if we don't have anything else to say on the patriotism study, then we can get to that. But that's
well, I'll tie
related.
it back when we talk about him, because I think that there is an interesting kind of connection between the two. But yeah, let's. I want someone else to speak on this guy first, because I admittedly don't know a ton about him.
All right.
Okay. Well,
go ahead.
Sorry, Jim. I was going to say I could introduce it then. So for our audience who might not be knowledgeable on this Zoran guy, who is an open Democratic Socialist, officially won the Democrat primary. So keep in mind, this is a primary for New York City mayor on Tuesday, after the city's Board of Elections released ranked choice voting tabulations. So keep that in mind when people are talking about ranked choice voting. So the results show that he increased his lead over former Governor Andrew Cuomo 56% to 44%. He got over 500,000 votes from ranked choice voting, which is the highest amount of votes a Democrat mayoral primary winner has received in 36 years. So It cannot be overstated, you guys, how also extreme that this guy is. He has called for abolishing New York City's Strategic Response Group, which is the group that helps keep the peace during like major protests when they break out. He has said multiple times that his like primary goal is to seize the means of production. And yes, he uses those words. And we have a clip of him from like 2 or 3 years ago, I think, somewhere around here. Andy, if you could pull up the clip that I sent you.
It's in the thing. Yeah, it's Mom Donnie Kami down in the in the bottom.
So this guy is really a radical, you guys. It's pretty hard to understate that.
Purposes about this entire project. It's not simply to raise class consciousness, but to win socialism. And obviously raising class consciousness is a critical part of that. But making sure that we have candidates that both understand that and are willing to put that forward at every which moment that they have, at every which opportunity that they're given. We have to continue to elect more socialists. And we have to ensure that we are unapologetic about our socialism. There are also other issues that we firmly believe in, whether it's BDS, right, or whether it's the end goal of seizing the means of production, where we do not have the same level of support at this very moment. And what I want to say is that it is critical that in the way that we organize, in the way that we set up our work and our priorities, that we do not leave any one issue for the other, that we do not meet a moment and only look at what people are ready for, but that we are doing both of these things in tandem, because it is critical for us to both meet people where they're at and to also organize for what is correct and for what is right, and to ensure that over time we can bring people to that issue. Yeah. The ramifications of victory here is the difference between life and death for so many of our brothers, sisters, and family beyond the binary across this borough of Queens. It's the difference between having cash bail anymore or not. It's the difference between having sex work be decriminalized and not. And with every battle that we fight as socialists, we need to remember what the stakes are and ground ourselves in them, and why those stakes are important and critical to us as individuals.
I have a quick question to either Linnea or Jim, or maybe Sam knows this. So that was a clip of him talking at like the Democratic Socialists of America winter or something or whatever, like a few years ago, right? So while he's running for mayor now, has he moderated the rhetoric that he's putting out there, or is this like basically the same stuff that he's saying right now?
The media is moderating or like trying to explain away his rhetoric for himself, but on the ground, he keeps insisting that he has not changed.
Okay.
So it's kind of one of those, like, the media is like, no, it's not, he's not that much, but he's like, oh, yes, I am. So,
Right,
and in
because that's okay. And I'm just gonna jump into what I have to say now because that's enough for me. This, you said he's like overtly a democratic socialist. Those comments are overtly
it's just
socialist,
communism. Yeah.
right? Like
Yeah,
that's not even like, so this idea that like, oh well, democratic socialists, they still believe in capitalism, right? They just want it more regulated, more open, whatever, more progressive tax rate, that sort of thing. Like, no, he's calling for the government to literally take over the means of production. Like, he said it, right? Those were his words. That wasn't his words back when he was like in high school or something, like some radical and he's found his way or something like that. Like that, he said that a couple of years ago. And as you're saying now, he's still basically saying that today. So that's not even just like democratic socialism. Like, that's just flat out socialist, if not communist, as you were saying. And I've seen some other things about him talking about having like government run grocery stores in certain parts of the city and all of that. So I think that, we're so far gone from like the days of, Bernie Sanders or AOC. They're like, no, we're democratic socialism. This is a different flavor. This is the non-fat, all flavor version of socialism. But like, this guy is so far in the other direction. And the idea that he won is kind of almost like a counterpoint to a lot of the cultural shift stuff that we're talking about. And that's kind of the angle that I wanted to bring up and see all of your reactions to it. Because like, is this a cultural shift? Because you would think that if it was a full-on cultural shift, there'd be no way that this guy could even make it through the primary system. Or are we seeing like a bifurcation of society where the wing that's still very much to the left is like even further left than ever? Maybe the majority is shifting over to the right or whatever, but like some very vocal sliver of that is like the pendulum, it hasn't stopped, it keeps going. So I'm curious of your thoughts on that, but that's all I have to contribute to this.
No, I think you're right. I think that they're doubling down and continuing to double down. And that was part of the point of what he was saying in that clip, right? Was he was articulating that, you have to meet people where they're at, as in, leftists or Democrats today have a tolerance. They've always had a tolerance for communism or for socialism. And so, but they're not quite ready to admit or to go along with like government run grocery stores seizing the means of production levels of socialism, communism. But he says, but we can't pretend like that's not where we're going. We have to keep pushing it. And I really think, a lot of conservatives are going to run around talking about how this guy is an idiot and he's blah, blah, blah. No, he's very smart. He has presented himself extremely well. This guy blows AOC out of the water on like every single count. He plays all of the right moves in all of the right audiences. It's been pretty impressive to watch. And his social media smarts are a lot better than a lot of other Democrats. So it's he's a real threat. It's not a joke. It's not funny. And I really hope that people take it seriously because he is attempting to move the window, at least in New York City, towards more acceptance of real communism. Not the conservatives call everything that's not conservative communism, but like real communism. And we can't not take that seriously. New York City is worth fighting for.
Yeah. Well, I mean, as you mentioned earlier, the Heartland Institute's done a lot of work opposing ranked choice voting, and this is what you get. Apparently, his election his win in the primary does not necessarily reflect the will of the people, even Democrats in New York City, but ranked choice voting, this is what you end up with. We end up with basically a Democrat named Murkowski in the Senate from Alaska, Alaska's a very conservative state, and they send the rhinoist, the Rhiny of rhinoists in Murkowski to the Senate, and we end up with a communist, a Bolshevik, a Marxist as the leading vote getter and the winner of the Democratic primary in New York City. Look, this guy is 33 years old. He's never managed anything, not a staff, not a department, nothing. As I said, he's a Marxist. He doesn't shy from that, although the media is trying to downplay it. And his ultimate goal, as he admits, and he hasn't walked that back either, is to, ultimately our goal is to seize the means of production. What does that mean in New York City, to seize the means of production in New York City? So hopefully that's where he will be contained. It'll be escape from New York, literally, very soon. But what is he gonna? He's gonna walk around and take everybody's phones and laptops, because that's the means of production for most people who live in New York City, especially in the Upper West Side and the other rich places. He wants to defund the police, and he's serious about it, and replace them with social workers. As you mentioned, he wants to open government-run grocery stores, basically Soviet grocery stores, and he's going to fund it with a phantom $140 million of quote-unquote subsidies to other grocery stores, not understanding that there isn't a pile of money, $140 million in bags sitting over here in a warehouse somewhere in the Bronx, and then that's handed out to all of these grocery stores. No, those are called tax credits, you idiot, you economic moron. You don't just, it doesn't exist. It's to encourage grocery chains to set up shop in so-called food deserts in high crime areas. So the guy doesn't even understand basic economics. Of course, if he understood economics, he wouldn't be a leftist, let alone a communist. Look, if you look at his election, he did very poorly in working class and poor areas in New York City. He did awesome in the rich white areas, especially among younger voters in rich white areas. Those are the people that are going to be able to escape from New York, like Snake Plissken. The rest of them, the poor people and some of the young people, will not be able to. They'll be stuck in New York City, living in a commie hellhole. He said, Mamdani said that we shouldn't have. It was last week or maybe Monday. We shouldn't have billionaires. Oh, okay. Hey, since you're on the subject, what is the cap you would put on somebody's salary or net worth? Let's hear the number. I want the number. And what do? Do you just seize all of their money? Of course you probably do. The point here being that socialism, Marxism, communism, Bolshevism, all these isms are wholly incompatible with the American way. Maybe, call it the American experiment, call it our inheritance as Americans. Those isms are not compatible with freedom and the quote unquote the American way. Maybe Superman might say that in the next movie. Probably not. But that's the problem here, is that Gen Z are embracing these ideas, as Sam alluded to earlier, because they are not taught that the American way is great. They're not taught, and they can't even see with their own eyes, that millions of illegal immigrants flow into this country, or did over the last 4 years, because it's the best place to live on earth. But our children, Gen Z, is not taught this, which is why they are embracing socialism, communism, and a completely unqualified moron like Mamdani to be the mayor of the financial capital of the world and the biggest city in the United States. We better wake up.
Is it
looks like there's a good
conclusion that he's going to win? Like,
I was going to say, it looks like there's a good chance that he will win. It depends. It all depends on how these independent candidates stack up, because Eric Adams, the current mayor, is running as an independent. Chances are that he will be elected, though, because of the splitting of the vote of the, I guess you would call it the anti-communist vote or something there, or not communist enough vote. But I think it's interesting, though, because we have to remember that if he does get elected, and if he does actually find ways to implement the kind of bizarre, grotesque agenda that he has proffered here, then there will be consequences. If you close down all the bodegas and turn them into communist-style grocery stores where you can buy some, one roll of toilet paper every month or something, it's not going to turn out well for the people of New York City. So there is the fact that if you try this, you're basically FAFOing as a city, and that's I think that will lead to some change in itself.
Sam, watch your mouth. This is a family show.
Yeah,
well, I
don't
said
know.
fool around and find out. That doesn't work, Jim.
Oh, is that it? Oh, okay, fine.
Yeah, I just wonder if at what point that because it's like there seems to be like a political backstop to a lot of these movements where, like, when it comes to you actually trying to get the votes, you have to go out there, you have to wave an American flag, you have to say that you're pro-America, all of that sort of stuff. So even like rhetoric gets super heated, and you've got Nancy Pelosi and those types that are encouraging these protests and all of that stuff. But once it gets to like the ballot box, all of a sudden they put on their hat that Linnea is wearing right now. But I just wonder if at some point in certain localities that the idea of like, like, no, not God bless America, God damn America, if that becomes like not a political just like kill shot right there. And at that point, that would be a very interesting inflection point. And to kind of go back to the beginning of this conversation, when you were talking about the decline in people that are patriotic or proud to be American is quickly declining, especially on the left. If there were going to get to an inflection point where that is a piece of rhetoric that a candidate doesn't run away from, but runs on. And once we get to that point, I don't even know. I don't even know what the future of the country looks like. I don't think we're there yet. But once we get to that point, I don't know if we can accurately predict what would happen.
Yeah, I think we're very, very close to being there. Really, realistically. So who knows? It's a heck of a thing. And that is the broader like cultural context that all of this is happening in, right? This is the reason why, or it's part of the reason why I think a lot of the left in Hollywood and other places are like still holding on to the extreme progressive stuff, is because they anticipate that maybe things will go further left again, or start swinging back in that direction. But we here will attempt to not stand for it. We're going to push back as best as we can at the Heartland Institute. Thank you guys all for coming. This was a fun show. I think we went an hour and a half. I think it was great. But that is unfortunately all of the time that we have. So thank you everyone for tuning in. We are live every single week on Thursdays at noon Central on Rumble, Twitter, YouTube, Facebook. Tomorrow, the Climate Realism Show is not going to be on air because we are going to be celebrating this beautiful nation's birthday. So, Jim, do you have anything to pitch for us?
Yeah, please go to heartland.org/inthetank to help support this show because our channel is demonetized. And I want to thank everybody in the chat. It was very fun reading those things and engaging with you guys this week. And have a happy Independence Day.
Wait, on the 500th episode, we're going to break a streak here. Usually there's big news that happens right after we end the show. But because we went an hour and a half, I can report there are people on Twitter or X suggesting that the House just passed the big, beautiful bill. So, FYI to that.
All right.
Fireworks.
Nice.
Okay, that is Donnie. What else, as long as you are active on your mic there, do you have anything to plug for us?
Nothing too out of the ordinary. Heartland.org. We've always got some stuff going on, so just stay tuned to that and the show, and of course the Climate Realism Show that isn't happening tomorrow, but will recommence next week.
And Sam, what have you got?
I want to affirm exactly what has gone before, which is go to heartland.org and check it out. There's incredible, fascinating knowledge to be found there, and you really can learn a lot. So please, by all means, go to heartland.org and chase down all the good work that this institute is doing.
All right, awesome. And to our viewers, if you have not closed out of the stream yet, if you are not subscribed and you are watching this every week devotedly, please subscribe to the Heartland Institute YouTube channel. So thank you guys so much, and we will see you again next week.